Good afternoon. My name is Laura Gibson. I have the honor of serving as the 142nd President of the State Bar of Texas and the 8th woman to hold that role for just a couple more days. I am thrilled to see such a robust group. You know, last year was our first annual meeting after the pandemic, and while we had a good turnout, this one's better, and I'm extremely happy. I know that this meeting is going to be excellent. We've got Randy Howery and Leslie Dibble, who are our co-chairs for the Annual Planning Committee, and they've got a lot of good programs in store for us. The annual meeting is an appropriate time for lawyers, judges, and law students to come together and celebrate leaders who have made outstanding contributions to the legal profession and their communities. We have a great speaker in Attorney General Bill Barr today, and I know you are all eager to hear from him. But before we get to that, we've got some presentations to make. Let me please call on Zachary, Alexander, and Victoria Pratt to come lead us in the pledges of allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Honor the Texas flag. I pledge allegiance to the Texas, one state under God, one and indivisible.
Please join me in giving them a great round of applause. They are the wonderful children of Laura Pratt, our next TYLA president, who will be sworn in very soon. At this time, I would like to invite Judge Mike Davis, the 2022-2023 Chair of the Local Bar Services Committee, to present the Local Bar Services Awards. Thank you,
Madam President. Great to see you again. Can I see the script?
I think this is mine.
She almost took off with the most important part.
Yeah, you're right.
All right, I've got it right here.
Thank you
so much. Thank you, Madam President. Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Michael Davis, and I'm the chair of the Local Bar Leaders Committee. And today I have the pleasure of presenting the awards for our Bar Leaders Conference. Again, I want to welcome you all back. We want to welcome General Barr as well as he joins us today for our luncheon. Now, the committee selects one individual who has shown commitment, dedication, and loyalty to the bar at all levels of service. This award is named after the late Judge Sam Williams, who served many years as Secretary of the Northeast Texas Bar Association and led this local bar organization into a strong association. It is his enthusiasm and professional pride that we commemorate today. It is now my honor to announce the winner of the 2023 Judge Sam Williams Award, Mr. Alastair Dawson. All right, and Alastair, if you'll hang out just for a moment, we're going to have you come up later to get a picture with President Gibson. But throughout his career, I want to tell you a little bit about Mr. Dawson and why he was selected this year. He has worked through state, local, and specialty bar associations to serve and strengthen his community and the legal profession. Alastair was president of the Houston Bar Association when Hurricane Harvey devastated the city. In the storm's immediate aftermath, he worked with others to mobilize lawyers to provide much-needed legal assistance to the thousands of Houstonians who were impacted. Also, during his presidency of the Houston Bar, he launched the Project Train Committee to help individuals with special needs obtain employment with law firms and corporate legal departments. He continues to spearhead that committee today. Alastair served on the State Bar of Texas Board of Directors from 2018 to 2021. He is the 2022-2023 chair of the Board of Directors of the Texas Bar Foundation, which solicits charitable contributions and provides funding to enhance the rule of law and the system of justice here in Texas. Now, Alistair contributes significant time to pro bono matters, having served as the chair of the board for Houston Volunteer Lawyers and on the board of Lone Star Legal Aid. He currently serves as a commissioner on the Texas Access to Justice Commission, an organization that addresses the legal needs of low-income Texans. Alistair is a member of the American Board of Trial Advocates and has served as president of the Houston chapter. Along with years of mentorship to law students and attorneys alike, his most recent impact to students regarding the legal profession was leading the Houston chapter of the Houston chapter of the Houston Bar Association 2021 American Board of Trial Advocates to bring a series of recorded book readings by local judges to enhance the civics curriculum in Houston area schools. This partnership is ongoing. These are just a few of the examples of Alistair's long record of service to the legal profession and beyond. Now, Alistair, one more time, if you'll please stand to be recognized, and again, we're going to have you come up at the end of the presentation for your picture. A round of applause for Alistair. Now, at this time, we're going to begin presenting the Local Bar Awards. As I said, I'm chair of the Local Bar Services Committee. If I have any of my committee members that are out there, if you'll please raise your hand. Got a few hands. If I can please get a round of applause for our committee members. The Local Bar Services Committee works hard to basically spread the gospel of the State Bar of Texas all throughout the state. We provide a range of services, a lot of education, and anything we can do to help local bar services. This is going to be my outgoing year as your chair. It's been an honor to serve as your chair for a number of years of this committee. It's going to be left to good hands. Ms. Leslie Dipple is going to be taking over as chair, and I couldn't be any more proud of her. So a round of applause, please, for Leslie. I veered off script just a little bit, so let me get back on task here before Susan Brennan comes up on the stage to remind me. Now, the Local Bar Services Committee honors local bar associations with the Award of Merit, recognizing their overall bar year, including community service, member service, publications, and social events. As I read the Award of Merit winners, please stand to be recognized. Following the program, you will receive your award and take pictures with President Gibson. Here we go. The Award of Merit winners are Division I, Jefferson County Bar Association. Where's Jefferson County? Stand up. There's one. All right, in Division III, we have the Tarrant County Bar Association. Tarrant County, where are you at? And there they are. Division IV, I have the Dallas Bar Association. Stand up, Dallas. We have many outstanding local bar associations and thank them for their exemplary service to their members, the community, and to the justice system. I would also at this time like to recognize the remarkable local bar executive directors and staff members. All volunteers know that your dedication enables the Texas lawyers to better serve their communities and provide access to justice. Will the representatives of the local bars being honored today please stand as I read your association name. And again, following the program, you'll receive your formal rewards and your picture with President Gibson up here on stage. Here are the recipients of the State of Texas Bar Awards. Austin Bar Association, Dallas Bar Association, Dallas Women Lawyers Association. A lot more enthusiasm there, all right. Houston Bar Association. All right, it's picking up a little bit. Jefferson County Bar Association. Lubbock Area Bar Association. San Antonio Bar Association. And once again, the Tarrant County Bar Association. All right, thank you all, your local bar representatives who are present today. Your commitment to the profession, your community, and our justice system is truly inspiring. Now at this time, as I said, I'll be stepping off as chair this year, but I do want to give acknowledgement to Susan Brennan. She has worked with me for a number of years. She's been a great assistant representative of the state bar. I've served on this committee with a lot of great people, and this is a time that I'm always going to reflect on. I came onto this committee in 2013 after leadership SBOT class, and it was a great experience. I enjoyed serving as a member for a number of terms, and then as vice chair and as chair. So again, it was my honor to be chair of this committee. Leslie, I'm looking forward to all the great things that you're going to do going forward. So now, I would like to invite President Gibson back to the podium to honor the State Bar of Texas Pro Bono and Legal Services Award recipients and the Law-Focused Education Award recipients. Following the program, you will receive your awards and take pictures. Madam President, thank you.
Thank you, Judge Davis, for your 10 years of service on the local bar services committee and having done a fabulous job chairing it for the last several years. So now that brings us to the Pro Bono Awards. Every year, the State Bar of Texas honors attorneys who selflessly take on pro bono cases in their pursuit to go above and beyond to achieve access to justice for low-income Texans. I'm honored to recognize the dedicated individuals, law firms, and legal service organizations of this year's State Bar of Texas Pro Bono and Legal Services Awards. As I read the winners' names, please stand to be recognized. Winners will receive their award and take photos after the luncheon. First, the Frank J. Skurlock Award honors an attorney for outstanding pro bono work. This year, the award goes to Hillary Holmes of Houston. The J. Chris Dougherty Legal Services Award recognizes an outstanding legal services staff attorney. This year's recipient is Monica Lopez Hinckley of Fort Worth. Where's Monica? The W. Frank Newton Award recognizes the pro bono efforts of attorney groups whose members have made outstanding contributions toward increasing access to legal services for the poor. This year, the award goes to Gibson, Dunn, and Crutcher, LLP in Houston. The Pro Bono Award recognizes a volunteer attorney organization that has made outstanding contributions to guarantee that all Texans have access to the legal system. This year, the award goes to the Dallas Volunteer Attorney Program. The Pro Bono Coordinator Award honors an individual for exceptional contributions to improve legal services for the poor while serving as the Pro Bono Coordinator for a legal entity. This year's recipient is Julie Stanger of Houston. The Pro Bono Support Staff Award recognizes the invaluable contributions that non-attorney volunteers provide. Its purpose is to promote the awareness of pro bono activities that non-attorneys can participate in and to encourage non-attorneys who work in the legal profession to volunteer their time and specialty skills to pro bono projects within their community. This year's recipient is Courtney Smith of Houston. The Warren Burnett Award is named for the late legendary Texas attorney Warren Burnett and recognizes extraordinary contributions to improving the quality of criminal legal representation to indigent Texans. The award honors either an individual or an organization for their work in the courtroom, legislature, or the public sphere. This year's recipient is Michelle Moore of Burnett. We honor these dedicated leaders today. They set an example for all of us of what we can do in our communities, and we are so appreciative of their work. Let's give them another round of applause. That takes us to the Law-Focused Education Awards. Texas has one of the best law-focused education programs in the country, and we are so proud of it. One of the best things about being an attorney is the opportunity to help others in a capacity that only those in the legal field are equipped to do. Only people with a law license can do what we do. This includes instilling a commitment to liberty, justice, and the rule of law in our elementary, middle, and high school students. Every year, attorneys work to kindle the spirit of justice among our youth through law-related education, and it is an honor today to acknowledge some of the most dedicated among them. After the program, winners will receive their awards and take photos. As I read the Law-Focused Education Award recipients, when you are recognized, please stand. The State Bar of Texas established the Nancy L. Garms Memorial Award in 1995 to honor an attorney or judge who emulates tireless service to the State Bar of Texas law-focused education programs. This year's recipient is Lisa Richardson of Round Rock. The honorary Leon Jaworski Award for Teaching Excellence recognizes an individual in the field of education or law who has made an outstanding contribution to the law-focused education by promoting and encouraging effective law-focused education programs in their schools or communities. This year's award goes to Marcy Deal of Bedford. The Leon Jaworski Award for Teaching Excellence recognizes those who've made an outstanding contribution to law-focused education and who foster understanding of our legal and judicial system. This year, the award goes to Ralph Arline, Jr. of Houston and Jonathan Ray of Carrollton. If you look at your program and take it with you, I encourage you to check out the work of these two gentlemen. It's amazing. Congratulations to all of our award recipients. We're grateful for your service to the profession and to the people of Texas. One more round of applause for them. I would now like to invite Randy Howry, one of our two co-chairs of the annual meeting committee, to come up and introduce our keynote speaker.
Thank you. Good afternoon. Thank you, President Gibson. It is a pleasure to be here and an honor to introduce our keynote speaker, the former U.S. Attorney General William Barr. A native New Yorker, General Barr earned his bachelor and master's degree at Columbia University, and while working at the CIA, earned his law degree at night at George Washington University. After a prestigious judicial clerkship, General Barr spent a decade practicing law at a Washington firm, interrupted by a stint in the Reagan White House. President George H.W. Bush appointed him Assistant Attorney General, Deputy Attorney General, and finally, the 77th Attorney General, where he played a key role in seminal events of that era, including the invasion of Panama, the bombing of the Pan Am 103, the Gulf War, the savings and loan crisis, and the LA riots. After that service, General Barr spent 15 years as General Counsel of GTE Corporation and its successor company, Verizon. Retiring at the end of 2008, he served on a number of corporate boards and consulted for corporate clients. In late 2018, General Barr agreed to serve again as Attorney General in the Trump administration. Taking office in February 2019, he was called upon to address many foreign and domestic challenges. General Barr is the founder and managing director of the Toradon Group, LLC, and Toradon Law, PLLC, and a distinguished fellow at the Hudson Institute. His memoir, One Damn Thing After Another, was published in March 2022 and was a #1 New York Times bestseller. Interviewing General Barr today will be Rocky Dhir. Rocky is the founder and CEO at Atlas Legal Research, a company that provides legal research and legal writing to law firms and corporate legal departments. As a lawyer, he has acted as outside general counsel to several startup companies and represented clients in complex business litigation. Since 2018, Rocky has been the host of the State Bar of Texas podcast, a monthly show produced in partnership with Legal Talk Network that brings you conversations across a variety of legal topics. Please join me in welcoming Attorney General William Barr and Rocky Dhir to the stage.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, how about another round of applause for Randy for that wonderful introduction. And of course, you might have heard of this guy, Bill Barr. Bill, welcome.
Thank you very much. Good to be here. Thank you.
Now, Bill, we're very happy to have you here in Texas, here at the wonderful JW Marriott in Austin, so welcome. Now, I have to ask you, are you actually happy to be here, or are you just relieved this is not taking place at the Four Seasons? So, look, let's get down to it. Look, here's the big question. You've served as Attorney General under 2 administrations, but this is the first time you've written your memoirs. Why now? What motivated you, or maybe compelled you, to write your memoirs at this stage and not at an earlier stage?
Well, this was clearly my last hurrah.
Famous last words. Yeah.
I was in the course of retiring when I finally agreed to go into the Trump administration. So I think it's a good time to sit back and reflect over your entire career. Last time I was Attorney General, I was 41 years old. Can you hear me, folks? Yeah. I was 41. I didn't think that merited me writing my memoir yet. But the real reason was, someone who was a mentor to me over the years and for whom I had high respect kept on arguing with me that I should write a memoir, and made me a very good offer. And I had nothing better to do at the time. And so I wrote a chapter about growing up, during my youth, and I sort of had fun doing it. I said, okay, I'll do this, and I signed the contract, and after that it was work. So.
Well, and speaking of last hurrahs, in your memoir you mentioned that you had no intention of getting back into public service, but then when you were asked to join the Trump administration, and let's make it clear, you're very clear in saying Donald Trump was not your first choice, second choice, maybe even third choice for the Republican nomination in 2016. But once he got the nomination, you were fully behind him. But when he asked you to be his Attorney General, you hesitated at first. There was a reason you took that job on. And it had to do with Robert Gates. Can you tell us what happened there?
Well, I had no intention of going back into government. I was really at a point in life that I had always hoped I'd be at, which was I was on some nice corporate boards and could dabble with clients that I had a long relationship with, but I had a lot of free time. My grandchildren were coming into the world, and it was a great time for my wife and me. But at the time, I felt that we were heading toward a constitutional crisis. I had never been a great fan of Trump's, and as you say, I started supporting him after he got the nomination. I supported him for that race. But I did feel he was likely the victim of obsessive, well, he called it a witch hunt eventually, but it was an excessive attack on him that turned out to be wasn't based on any fact. So I did feel bad that he was being denied his chance for a presidency. He was the duly elected president. I felt he should have his shot. And also the institutions that I cared a lot about, the Department of Justice and the FBI were being battered from all sides, actually both sides of the political spectrum, and had been drawn into this political maelstrom. I feel strongly about the institution. Two of my kids were as prosecutors in the department, and I felt because I wasn't looking for something in the future, I wasn't looking for a job, I could afford to do what I thought was right, I might be in a good position to help the administration stabilize and help the Department of Justice stabilize. So I eventually came around to saying I would do it.
I think you said that Robert Gates.
Oh yeah, so at H.W.'s funeral,
Yeah.
a lot of the Bush cabinet was there, the old Bush cabinet, and I had already talked to Trump. I had agreed to be interviewed, and they didn't. No one was aware of this, and I asked them what they said. We see your name out there as someone being considered. I said, yeah. What do you think about that? And all of them were very insistent that I should do it, and especially Bob Gates, who said to me, look, the country's in a really bad situation right now, and what's needed are people who take these difficult jobs who know what the hell they're doing. So he said, if you have the opportunity to do this, I urge you to do it. So Gates is someone I always admired. We worked very closely together under H.W., and that had a lot of influence on me.
And I think he'd also told you that when the President of the United States asks you to do something, you step up and do it.
Right, yeah.
So that begs the question, if President Biden asked you to join his cabinet, would you do it?
What you said before, is a very sort of common hackneyed expression, like when the president asks you to do it. You obviously should weigh that very heavily, and it's a big reason to serve the country, but you obviously have to be, believe in the policies of an administration. And, obviously I wouldn't serve in Biden's administration.
What if President Trump wins 2024 and asks you to rejoin his cabinet?
Who?
President Trump, Donald Trump.
Well, that's more than speculative. Well, first, thankfully, I'm not in that. I will never be in that position for a number of reasons.
Well,
but
read the book; you'll find out.
But no, I wouldn't serve under him again. And frankly, it's hard for me to think of any of his cabinet secretaries who would, except for those who are really dying for another job, and I'm not.
You've got a book deal out now. Who needs a job on the cabinet? So let's talk for a second, though, about the 30 years almost that lapsed between your first stint as Attorney General and then your second stint as Attorney General. One thing that was a constant in the book is I would say it's a passion, maybe a zeal, a focus on preventing violent crime. That seemed to have been something very, very important to you in both your times in office. Explain to us why you felt that was so important and why that became such a linchpin of both your times in office.
Well, I think the first duty of government, the reason we establish government, is to keep people safe, to protect them so they can go about pursuing their dreams. And that's the reason we establish government at the end of the day. And if a government isn't protecting people physically and keeping them safe from predators in our midst or from foreign adversaries, it's not performing its basic job. And when I was AG before, the first time, crime was at its all-time high in the United States. It's much higher than it was, probably twice as high, maybe a little less than that, than it is today. But it had gone up 500% since 1964 to 1991. And it had started leveling off under Reagan, but it was still going up. And I had the backing of the president to lean forward as the federal government, because up to that time, the federal government wasn't really 100% in on the violent crime front, because most of it, 95% of it, is state and local crime. So we put together a comprehensive program that really focused on identifying the chronic violent offenders who are responsible for a disproportionate amount of the crime and trying to incapacitate them by increasing sentences for these habitual offenders. Texas in those days, it was under consent decree on its prisons, and it was releasing a lot of people at that point. And the sentences of time actually served for very violent offenders was really low in Texas and Florida and places like that. That was driving a lot of the national statistics. But anyway, that year, 1992, was the first year it started going down in 5 decades. Did I say 5 decades? Let me see. No, the 60s, the 70s, and the 80s. That's right. So 92 was the first time it went down for that period. And it's gone down, and then it went down 22 consecutive years. When I came back in, it started going back up again, and we wanted to push it down and work closely with the state and local people to carry out programs, especially targeting gun offenders, people who use gun in violent crime, and get them off the street. So it's always been something I think is, the first duty of government. And I think the federal government can play a role by working closely with state and local governments. Our structure were these state and local task forces, which have now grown a lot since they were initiated in the early 90s. So it's a really good tool. When I was in Chicago during the COVID period and crime was going off the charts, the chief of police, who was from Dallas, Chief Brown, who was driving around with him, he said, "Keep on doing what you're doing. You're the only game in town for a city like Chicago. We don't have the support of the local government, prosecutors here. You're the only game in town, and without you, without the federal government, this place would be completely out of control."
In your book, page 471, to be precise.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
You remember the page, yeah. You write in there, you say, the lives of black victims of violent crimes matter. Mm-hmm. You never said Black Lives Matter. You put it in that phraseology, that choice of words. Explain to us the significance. Why did you phrase it that way?
Well, at the time, I don't think people were paying attention to really what really weighs upon the inner city communities in our country and their real attitudes toward the police and the role of government. So when first time I was Attorney General, there were 12,000 black deaths from violent crime a year, 12,000. And after 22 years of reducing crime, it was down to 7,000. Crime generally in the United States fell by more than half. Murder among African Americans dropped from 12,000 to 7,000 a year. Now it's going back up, and very substantially. Hopefully it'll start easing up a bit. But that's 5,000 lives a year saved by putting the bad people in prison, in my opinion. And I'll never forget going to my first trip into after I became Attorney General, the first time was into Trenton, in inner city Trenton, very high crime rate at the time. And I was going to visit with the local community, and I was a little apprehensive about how they would receive me. And I walked into the room, and they immediately started saying, Mr. Barr, you have to start protecting us. Look down the street here, all the bars on the housing. Those bars are holding us in our house. Well, these little punks are on the street, and they rule the neighborhood. We're in our golden years, and we want to be protected, and what can you do to help us? And that's the attitude I have generally found even today in the inner cities when I go there. I think during the Black Lives Matter rioting in the summer, a lot of the people talking were not really representing the views of the people who actually live in those communities. Maybe some of them, but I don't think it was preponderant.
One of the things that didn't feature in your memoirs anywhere was any talk of disparities in sentencing, whether it's gender-based, whether it's race-based. You never talked about that. Can you maybe talk about it now? Why, when you were Attorney General both times, why was there not a focus on eliminating race-based and gender-based disparities in sentencing. And that's a pretty well-known phenomenon that is still occurring.
Well, actually, I don't think there is race-based or gender-based discrepancy in sentencing in the federal system that I'm familiar with. Some crimes, by definition, or not by definition, but by reasons of history, may fall on certain communities, but that's not race-based.
Well, according to the U.S. Sentencing Commission, it's their report from November 14th, 2017. I believe the title of it was
When was it?
Demographic Differences in Sentencing by the U.S. Sentencing Commission. November 14th, 2017 came out. And they acknowledge that there is this problem at the federal level. And as Attorney General, would that have been something that the DOJ would have stepped into?
So one of the things the federal government essentially tries to use its power to secure the streets in certain narrow areas. It doesn't go out and do armed robberies and things like that. But on things like crack cocaine, the first time I was Attorney General, crack cocaine was a big issue. The leadership of the black communities was coming in and saying, you have to crack down on crack cocaine. And the story was going around that this was a CIA conspiracy or a white conspiracy to decimate the black community. So in those days, the view of crack cocaine was do anything possible to stop it. It's like a nuclear bomb. That's what they said. It's a nuclear bomb in our community. So when you crack down on crack cocaine and you're going after the organizations that are distributing it, you will have more African Americans arrested under those severe laws than others. But that's not because they're African Americans. It's because they're distributing cocaine. And I'm not aware of anything in the criminal justice system that is based on race or gender in terms of giving the sentence. It depends what crime. I mean, most white-collar criminals are white. Is that a disparity?
Well, I think what the Sentencing Commission was alluding to was you get two defendants accused of roughly the same types of crime. And in general, women were given lighter sentences than men. And amongst men, black men got harsher sentences by 19.1% on average than their white counterparts. So the question becomes, if that's happening at the federal level, is that something that the DOJ should have been paying some attention to and maybe telling its prosecutors to be aware of when they're making sentencing recommendations?
Well, of course the prosecutors are told that, and furthermore, the Civil Rights Division is quite aggressive. Usually when I hear from the states, they feel they're much too aggressive in looking at disparate impacts and trying to determine whether or not it's actually based on race.
You said too aggressive. What do you mean by that?
I said some states, according to some states, too aggressive.
In what sense? How are they too aggressive?
I'll have to ask the states.
Okay. All right, fair enough. Now, one of the things that you did talk about, and this was very interesting, you use the term successor ideology when referring to the far progressive left. Tell us what successor ideology is and why you were concerned about it.
Well, successor ideology is actually the term coined by a lot of commentators who up till recently have been considered liberal. Like Sullivan and Wesley Yang and others. And what they're saying is that the successor to classical Marxist-Leninist kind of historical dialectic materialism, where everything is based on class and there's an evolution of history that will lead to some final resolution of class conflict, that the successor to that is essentially this pastiche of what they say are oppositional ideologies, things that claim that the existing culture, the existing political structure is fundamentally corrupt, and we must be in opposition to the current structure, the current classical values or traditional values and so forth that are prevalent in society, and they have to be taken down to make way for the great equitable nirvana that is in the distance if we can just mobilize society to get there. That's what I think they're talking about the successor ideology. And I do think there's something to that. I do think that the progressive move, I think there's, to me, the most significant development in our political environment in the past 30 or 40 years has been the sharp shift of the Democratic Party to the left, where the center of gravity seems to become more and more of this progressive wing of the Democratic Party. And I think that then created a reaction among, and all the empirical evidence shows that the Republican Party has pretty much stayed where it's been. But I think in more recent years, the further right there are further right elements of the party that are reacting against what they think are the excesses of the progressives.
But what do you say to people that, many moderates on either side, center left or center right, who feel effectively politically homeless? And they say, look, I'm not a Tea Partier, and I certainly am not on the far left either. You know, because you said that there's empirical evidence suggesting that the Republican Party has stayed fairly solid in where it was. But I think for a lot of rank and file conservatives, they'd say, no, that the Tea Party has hijacked the party. Do you feel differently than they do?
Well, I think the Tea Party isn't really the driver right now. I think something perhaps has supplanted that. And I don't like the extreme polarization that's occurred. And we are now in the politics of mobilization rather than persuasion. And there's a lot of factors to that. Politicians who are clinging to their office seem to be they want to do anything to cling to their office. They want to head off being challenged from their left or right, depending what part of the spectrum they're on. And so they tend to move to the extreme of the spectrum to shut off any challenge. I think that's one of the big drivers. But I do think, as I said, and I'm not saying this as if it answers where we go from here, but I'm just saying I think the origins of this bipolarity that we have was really the sharp movement to the left of the Democratic Party. And the more the policy positions moves further and further away from something that can be bridged through compromise, the more you have the kind of stasis we have in the system. For example, gun control. Any reasonable attempt at gun control is stymied, primarily because the people who want to regulate guns have sort of made it clear what their agenda is, which is doing away with AR-15s and, doing away with what some people consider, the heart of the Second Amendment. So are you going to sit down at the table with people when you feel that that's their ultimate goal? And I think, most people who have been involved in trying to find some reasonable steps to address some of the gun violence have found that to be the case. There's sort of no hope of dialogue because everyone feels that it's a slippery slope and they're not willing to engage. And the essence of our system has been compromise and trying to figure out, maybe taking a step and incrementalism and so forth. And that's almost impossible to do nowadays.
What would you recommend then on the issue of gun control? Because
well, I'm not
it looks like from your book you do believe
gun
in it.
control, but what I tell people about the answer to the polarization is I say, well, there are a lot of things that we have to do on that, but the first step is to reject, in my opinion, I'm a Republican obviously, and have been since, my first political memory was making a speech for Dwight David Eisenhower. So I think there has to be a decisive defeat of the craziness that is being driven by, I consider, radical progressivism. And I think actually the makings of that are out there in the body politic. So when you look at a state, what I say to people, so anyway, a decisive victory analogous to what Reagan did in '80. Because leading up to '80 through the Vietnam War, and in those days the Vietnam War was the catalyst, you had the Democratic Party going far to the left. And at that time people were saying, what's going to happen to the country and so forth. Reagan came in and won 44 states. Re-election, he won 49 states and lost the only other state by a few thousand votes. And then his vice president, H.W., won by 44 states. And then the Democrats were forced into the middle and came up with Clinton, who was the leader of the Democratic Leadership Committee or Conference or whatever it was called. But he essentially governed from the center. So that was a long period of time where you essentially had center-right policies in the United States. But what it took was someone uniting the opposition to the more radical elements on the Democratic side and trouncing them in 1980. And I think the stuff is there to do that again. That's step one, to reject the extremism coming from the left. But the problem, in my opinion, is Trump. I don't think Trump is capable of bringing together a center-right coalition capable of doing that. Can it be done? Obviously it can be done. If you look at Florida, look at Georgia, look at Texas, those are three governors who are conservative governors, and their policies have increased their popularity markedly, even among Democrats, and certainly they've recouped a lot of the losses that had been triggered by Trump's ascendancy. So I think it can be done. I just think that of the Republicans out there, Trump is uniquely unable to address any other faction except his hardcore base. And I think.
What does it say to you that except for 2004, since 1988, the Republican Party hasn't won the popular vote a single time? It's been, they may have won states, but it's not the popular vote. Does that signal maybe that the Republican messaging and the Republican policies need to be updated to you?
I think, when you have a state like Florida that had been a one-point state, DeSantis won it by 20 points. He won big Democratic districts that hadn't been won in a long time by Republicans. You look at Georgia, which is a purple state. Brian Kemp won by 1%, and then after 4 years of governing, even with Trump against him and trying to tank him, he won by 7.5%. And then you have Youngkin in Virginia, which is, again, probably a red state, not even a purple state. And polls now show him beating Biden by 15%, where Trump still loses to Biden in Virginia. Has he done that by changing policies? No, he's done that with conservative policies. But he's also able to speak and communicate, and that's an important part of being a president, a Republican president, because otherwise you can't get past the media unless you can actually give a sustained and coherent message.
Well, isn't it telling though that, I mean, why is it that on a national level, in your view, I mean, let's go back, George W. Bush did not win the popular vote in 2000. He did in 2004, but then after that, every Republican candidate has lost the popular vote on a nationwide basis. What does that say to you? I mean, wouldn't Democrats be, especially in 2016, wouldn't they be justified to some degree in saying, look, we're upset that we won the popular vote, yet we lost the presidency?
We don't run our country according to the popular vote. We run it according to state votes. And, Republicans don't go and campaign and try to and have turnout projects and everything else. And maybe
they should.
Well, I'm not a political technician.
In your view, is there a Republican today who you think could win the nomination and go on and win the presidency?
I think anyone currently running, or pretty close to everyone running, other than Trump.
Everyone other than Trump at this point. So you think if Trump wins a nomination, you predict he loses in 2024?
I predict that he has the best chance of losing. A lot depends on what's going on at the time, but I think he definitely has the best chance of losing. And I think better than 50-50 of losing. But also I think if he wins, he would win, he'll be a lame duck, but he will also win with such a narrow margin that he will probably hurt the Republicans in the House. The Republicans would probably lose control of the House, and may even be hurt a little in the Senate. But so he wouldn't have the ability to govern. He would be a lame duck without support in Congress, and his style of governance is such that he's really not able to take policies and ideas and translate them effectively into some kind of durable program.
It's interesting because in the book, you do lay a lot of our societal woes at the feet of the far left, the far progressive movement, as you've coined it. There's one quote that I thought was particularly just, it was kind of a zinger. It's a long quote, but I'm going to read it out for everybody. The great preponderance of media managers, editors, commentators, and reporters were simply unwilling to defend American constitutional ideals, very much including the First Amendment guarantees of speech and press freedom, in order to coddle a movement of progressive zealots.
Yeah, I think I was discussing the evolution of the media. I consider the media one of the foremost reasons that Donald Trump emerged and won. Because of the anger that it generated, its obvious partisanship and its abandonment of any semblance of attachment to objective truth versus pushing a particular narrative. And I think this was very frustrating to many voters, and their attacks on Trump actually strengthened him. And in terms of so-called protecting democracy, the foremost threat to democracy today is what's happened to First Amendment values in this country, where I think the left tries to shut down discourse and debate and says, well, the matter's decided, and if you say this, it's hate speech, or some other excuse for trying to shut down voices that disagree with them. And I think most reasonable and honest observers would have to say that the threat to free speech is coming from the left, and the institutions that should be supporting free speech, namely academic and the media, are not doing it.
But then at the same token, if you look at, again, this is a question I really want to ask you, because you place a lot of this at the feet of the left, and there may be those who agree with you on that. But then,
well, wait a minute. I sort of said a little while ago that I think the genesis of it and the dynamic that brought this state of affairs about was the shift of the Democratic Party to the left. And there are a lot of Democrats out there, more so than Republicans these days, that feel that the Democratic Party has completely left them, way by a large margin.
And you don't.
Then
you
I
don't
said
think
that
Republicans feel
naturally,
that way?
as in politics, that triggers a reaction. And there is a reaction on the right, and some of those people go too far. One of the problems in politics and almost any movement is, as Reagan used to say, you have really two kinds of people that get attached to a movement. One are people who actually understand the principles, and they really worry about and try to take those principles and how do we get those adopted within a democratic republic, working through that process. How do we achieve those, in a practical brass tacks sense, those policies? Then you have what Reagan used to refer as going off the cliff with all flags flying conservatives. Same thing is on the left too. And these are people it's more performance. It's about their performance because, they signal their virtue. I've adopted this, I'm a conservative or I'm a progressive. And then it's all about performance to show people what they're about, but they're not very practical. They're willing to go off a cliff because for them it's all about raising money, getting television hits as talking heads, and building up their social media base because it's about them. And they introduce legislation as parts of performance, but they won't do the hard work of trying to work through problems. And when people do that hard work on the Hill, they're met with, brickabats thrown all the time at them.
But then what do you say to those who level that same type of criticism at the right by saying, for example, issues like abortion rights, same-sex marriage, right? If you're a true conservative, theoretically, you want people to be able to live their lives the way they choose to live them, which means if they believe in abortion or they believe in same-sex marriages, they get to go do that. But it's the folks on the right that are speaking most loudly against those principles. How do you marry that up with the way you phrased it in your book and here today?
In my opinion, the ideology that actually has built into it the idea of using state power to force people to live their lives a particular way is really the progressive movement. It's essentially a collectivist movement. We all have to sort of adopt these views, and that's why they're so intolerant of other opinions. Now, I think this has spawned some people on the left who really don't understand conservatism, and they view it as the mirror image of progressives, and therefore we have to use state power to force on people things that we think are morally correct. And that's not what conservatism is about. Conservatism is about limited government, giving broad freedom to individuals to chart their destiny. And to the extent you enact sort of moral precepts into law, it should be things that are generally supported and reflect a broad consensus in society. Otherwise, it's not a stable rule. People won't follow it, and it's not a stable rule. It'll only lead to, fierce fighting. That's why, for example, on abortion, I'm personal. People seem to have a hard time making a distinction, but between what people consider a binding moral rule that governs the universe and should govern their actions versus what the state commands and puts sanctions behind under secular law. There is a distinction. Not everything that people consider immoral should be punished or treated under the criminal law or any other law of the United States. But people have sort of some people feel that that's, if they're trying to push transgenderism or other things, I'm going to use the law to push what I believe is the right answer. I personally think conservatism, I've said this when I was going through confirmation, it's basically, it should be in our society with such diversity, we have to have a live and let live attitude. And I think there are people on the right who don't understand that, but I think generally the real threat to personal liberty is not coming from the right. I think it's the dreary conformity that's being imposed on society, both by legal means and by the use of all the cultural and institutional power that can be mobilized by the left these days in society.
But then don't you think, so you're talking about using legal means, but for a lot of folks on the left, the idea that the Supreme Court can come in and basically take away abortion rights is the use of legal means.
Well, come on. I mean, they didn't take away abortion rights. I mean, we're lawyers here, okay? They left the issue to the states. They didn't take away anything.
But a state,
and to me, it's a pro-democratic move to leave the thing to the states. One of the problems we have in our society today, driven by progressivism, is this idea that, the only thing we can do, the only way problems can be or issues can be addressed is on a one-size-fits-all for the country. And the framers didn't believe that. They thought federalism was a safety release valve. It let the steam out. States can do different things. Communities can become coherent communities with values that are generally shared to some extent and reflected in their laws. And I think we've gotten into this idea that everything has to be done with one federal law, and that creates that turns the nation into a pressure cooker. So for the Supreme Court to say we're getting the federal government out of this area, and it's up to the states, was a pro-democratic step, and it didn't do anything directly on the abortion laws.
But then what do you say about states like Iowa, I think it's Iowa, that effectively criminalizes any woman or any doctor who performs an abortion outside the state of Iowa, in a state where it might be legal? They've effectively criminalized it beyond their borders.
Well, some states had these snapback provisions that if Roe v. Wade was struck down, the law would the old law would immediately pop up, and some of those states haven't yet addressed it yet. I personally, putting on my hat as a citizen of Virginia,
sure,
and say, what do I favor for the state of Virginia or the Commonwealth of Virginia? I don't think that people in Virginia want to go beyond some kind of limitation on the term. So, whatever it is, 15 weeks or what have you. And if that is a stable rule that enjoys broad support, I'm willing to accept that. Privately, I might, as an individual, try to convince people there should be more severe restrictions, but given where we are today, I think that's a fine result. That's how I look at these issues. And the Supreme Court, I think, was absolutely right under the Constitution, that the framers did not address this issue. They would have viewed this as something to be dealt with by the states.
Let's shift gears for a second in the time that we have left, because I do want to make sure we cover as much as we can in the limited time that we have up here. In the book, when you talk about the Trump administration, started in 2017, ends in 2021, it almost sounded, and correct me if you think this is wrong, it sounded like there was a little bit of maybe sympathy for what Trump was going through when he was president. Is that a fair characterization? I mean, you seem to
Well, I think I said that earlier. I think I said that, like some things in life, in fact, probably like most things in life, there's, it's not purely black and white. We live in a Manichaean age where everything has to be, oh, you say that? Well, you say Trump did something wrong? Oh, I thought you were a supporter of Trump. Well, two things in tension with each other can be true at the same time. And I felt the thing about Trump is, for all his flaws, and there are many, and I will certainly be willing to talk about those in the future going forward, he had some good points. And those are the good points are what got him elected. And also, that's number one. And number two, and I hoped, by the way, that he would, as many of people who supported him after he got the nomination, that he would rise to the occasion on becoming president. But part of what undermined him, and part of the truth is that he was met with effectively an attempted coup when he came into office. They were trying to drive him out of office for something that never happened.
You're talking about Russiagate.
Of course. So I did feel sympathy that the pylon was unbelievable, and it was very hard for him to govern. And the idea behind the resistance was anything goes. Resistance means, no fair play. Anything goes because at the end of the day, the ends justify the means. And so all kinds of things were done to hobble his administration. So yes, if you detected some sympathy and concern for that dynamic, I say it in the book, and I said it earlier, yes.
Well, and in all fairness, you're not the only one who has said the Russiagate thing was baseless. There's not only the Mueller report, but even James Bamford in his latest book, Spy Fail, talks about how there was no basis for that.
I think anyone who today thinks that there's a basis for it should be wearing a colander. Seriously, there's no basis for the Russiagate nonsense.
No, but with that in mind, there's when the 2020 election comes around, and when Trump loses, his camp, as you pointed out, made some. I think you said Giuliani and his gang made some rather outlandish, clownish types of arguments and demonstrations to try to overturn the election. But for folks that are actual supporters of Donald Trump, do they have a point in saying that maybe the Dominion machines were fine, but was the election stolen in the sense that he was never given a fair shake as president? I want to hear you weigh in on that, because I don't think that really came out in the book.
Well, I think there were things done, the rule changes in the state that favored the Democrats. I think rules easing up and permitting harvesting of ballots are atrocious, and do away with the secret ballot. And in practice, at least that time around, certainly favored the Democrats. So I do think there was some of gaming the system. My point, first, I don't think the election was stolen by fraud. I also think that although there were rule changes that favored the Democrats, Trump lost the election. It was his to win, and he lost it because of his own behavior and his refusal to do anything other than pander to his base, despite the advice of every advisor who talked to him, as far as I'm aware. So I think that's the ground of what I believe. But my concern all the way through was, and I said this in the run-up to the election, that I thought the Democrats were playing with fire in going in and playing these games in the state. Because in a very closely divided country like ours, the main thing we have going for us is trust and transfer of power. And if they do that kind of thing, it's going to be very hard to persuade people it was a legitimate election. It's very hard to prove fraud one way or the other, or disprove fraud. But they're not going to have confidence in the election whether there was fraud or not. That was my position. And I think what we're seeing around us is exactly a manifestation of that. It doesn't matter what the facts are. They still believe the election was somehow stolen. And I think both, if we want to avoid this, and it's critical that we do, then we have to get our head out of the partisan vice, and we have to do what we have to do as two parties to make sure that people have confidence in the integrity of the vote, not play games that we think will be of momentary advantage for our party.
Do you think the U.S. Supreme Court should have taken the case and at least heard it and put an opinion out there that kind of put it all to rest? Did they do a disservice by not hearing the cases, or do you think they did the right thing and just refusing to hear the cases altogether?
I think they did the right thing. The records were at that stage were just, not sufficient to take action on.
Wouldn't have that at least put the matter to rest, though? They could have put out an opinion that explained in detail why they thought there was no basis for this challenge.
They adjudicated it within the law, but they didn't go beyond that. They're not I don't view them as a big political institution that we can sort of, it'd be nice to have their opinion on this, it'll help. I don't view the Supreme Court that way.
So,
and by the way, I'm not sure the federal claims, most of this stuff was raising state claims. That the states are in charge of the election. The only hook of the federal government is fraud, criminal fraud. The states control the election. And most of the allegations were that rules that were designed to stop fraud were being violated. Do something about it, or assume that there was fraud. That was most of the argument. And it's state claims. And then that claim from Texas, I thought was ridiculous. The idea that, Texas, can invoke the Supreme Court and sue another state for something going on in that state. So I thought the Supreme Court was right there.
in terms of, let's say, so you say Donald Trump was treated unfairly during his presidency. Do you think he's still being treated unfairly? He's just been indicted, so this is an indictment question.
Maybe you could hold two things in your mind at the same time, which is, yes, sometimes he's treated unfairly, but sometimes he's his own worst enemy, and he has fundamental flaws that can do a lot of damage also. Now, the New York case was, in my opinion, the New York cases now are an abuse of the prosecutorial power. I think they are laughable, the legal theories there. And it's being done. These are two politicians, the state AG and the local DA, who ran on going after Trump. So I do think those cases are unfair. And there are a lot of things that may deserve scrutiny that aren't unfair. And my attitude is, if I think it's unfair, I'll say it. And if it's not, I'm not going to deny that January 6th is something that's serious and that should be looked at.
What about the classified documents? Let's just talk about
I'm very much
that.
on record on the classified documents. I've said all along that the two things you determine here is, one, do you have a righteous case? Do you have the evidence to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that there was a crime, something that other people would be charged with, like a general or something like that? And then second, are there special reasons to exercise prosecutorial discretion not to bring it. And here I said, before all of this, yeah, the AG should consider the effect on the concern over a double standard in our country, the division in our country, the precedent of taking a former president and sentencing him to, or prosecuting him under the criminal law. Those are things that an AG could take into account. And frankly, I don't know where I would come out on that if I were in Garland's spot. And I say, yeah, you can make a good argument that maybe the double standard, you'd pull back from it. But then what I've said is, but if you want to make that argument as Republicans, all you're saying is he shouldn't be prosecuted. It doesn't say that what he did wasn't grossly wrong. The kind of thing that Trump supporters all during 2016 were yelling, "Lock her up." Presumably they wanted to lock her up because what they thought she was doing was bad. And so now, how can you come along and say, well, he did it, but he should be president of the United States. He should be our nominee for president of the United States. So I don't have a problem. I think it's a close question whether as a matter of discretion you shouldn't pursue the case. But I actually think I don't have a problem with the department's, the way the department came out on that analysis. Because also the other issue is, I believe there is a double standard. I've seen it firsthand. And whenever I tried to rectify it and do what I thought was fair in a particular case without regard to politics, I usually was beaten up pretty badly for it. So I know firsthand what the double standard is inside the Department of Justice. And I say it's not that everybody is that way, and certainly I think the center of gravity in the department is not that way. But there is a double standard. But how do you get beyond a double standard? And I think the best way of getting beyond a better standard is not to perpetuate it by continuing to depart from the honest application of the law in a particular case. It's just to honestly apply the right standard case after case. Not to say, well, so-and-so got a pass, I'll give this guy a pass. Then what happens to this guy? Give him a pass. And then anyone like him, you give them a pass. So let's get back on track, and I think that that's a legitimate argument, and therefore I don't have a problem with what the department has charged in that case.
So, Bill, we have time for one last question. And in reading your memoirs, and I read it cover to cover, and I will tell you, despite whether you're a Bill Barr supporter or whether you're a detractor, it's a very well-written memoir. And so I commend you for that. One thing that's been a constant throughout the memoirs, and this spans a very long period of time between two different administrations, the one constant has been you. And what I mean by that is that I don't see in there where your views have changed or where you say, hey, on further reflection, I was wrong about this, or the principles that I espoused at that time in my life are no longer relevant. Nothing like that. So I wanted to ask you as kind of a final question, have your views on anything evolved or changed, and if so, how?
Well, I think anyone whose views don't evolve and change over their life is, a mummy,
So how so? How have they changed?
Well, there are many ways my views have changed, generally in the direction of greater tolerance. So I would have said maybe when I was younger that I would have probably not been as open to the idea of the state sanction of gay marriage when I was much younger. But over time, I felt that there should be a way that people who are gay and want to make that kind of lifetime commitment have the same legal rights as people who are not. Now, when this thing was still in the political sphere and states were allowed to fashion the laws, I favored in Virginia. I thought, okay, well, I think there should be a civil union thing that gives the same legal rights. But my view on marriage was the idea that marriage is a distinctive institution that refers to a union between a man and a woman. I have no problem with gay people having that, but I didn't think they should take the word marriage that's a distinctive institution and adopt that for the same thing. But once the Supreme Court ruled, I don't lose any sleep. I'm fine with the current situation. It probably wouldn't have been true when I was much younger. So that's just one example of over time, your views changing. People tend to be less tolerant when they're young. They tend to view everything black and white, and part of growing up is to see things are frequently more complicated than you imagined.
And probably the most tolerant person we know is your wife, Chris, with whom you're celebrating 50 years of marriage tomorrow. So with that, he decided to go ahead and spend the last day of his 49th year of marriage with us here in Texas in the heat. So, Bill, thank you again for being a part of this. He had a choice. He could have just gotten up there and made prepared remarks. Instead, he asked for an interview-style format where he could be asked anything. And so, Bill, thank you again for giving us this. And guys, let's give Bill Barr another round of applause.
Well, that was compelling. Once again, thank you, General Barr, and thank you, Rocky. It was just outstanding. Another round of applause. So, as has been mentioned and discussed, you can purchase General Barr's book, and he'll be available outside this ballroom to sign the books. So, please do so. Throughout today's program, we've honored leaders who are compelled to make a difference in the legal profession and their communities. We are all inspired by their efforts. As a reminder, as we close, all award winners, please come to the front of the room, pick up your award, and you'll have photographs taken with President Gibson. Thank you for joining us as we celebrate the many accomplishments of local bar associations and attorneys. And we close. Thank you very much.